Benjamin Carter had everything handed to him: money, luxury, and a name that carried weight in the tech industry. As the only son of William Carter, the CEO of Carter Innovations, Benjamin's life revolved around fast cars, glamorous parties, and zero responsibility. But that all changed the day William decided he'd had enough. "You're wasting your life," William had said, his voice cold and firm. Benjamin, still nursing a hangover from the night before, had rolled his eyes, expecting another lecture. But what came next left him stunned. William had made arrangements, an arranged marriage, to a woman Benjamin had never met. Her name was Elsa Reed, a beekeeper from a rural town far removed from the glitz of city life. "You're going to marry her," William declared, "and you're going to live on her farm until you learn the value of hard work and responsibility. If you refuse, you're on your own. No money, no support." Benjamin couldn't believe it. Marry a stranger? Live on a farm? It sounded like some twisted joke. But as he stared into his father's unwavering gaze, he realized this was no bluff. His life was about to change in ways he never imagined. The train pulled into the small-town station with a screech, jolting Benjamin Carter out of his thoughts. As he stepped off, he was greeted by the faint hum of cicadas, the distant sound of a tractor, and a gust of fresh country air that felt completely alien to him. This was a world away from the glass towers and bustling streets of his old life. The ride to Elsa Reed's farm was a bumpy journey down dirt roads lined with wildflowers and weathered fences. Benjamin stared out the window, his designer shoes tapping nervously against the truck's floor. He wasn't sure what he expected, but the sight of the farm was underwhelming. A modest house with peeling white paint, a barn that had seen better days, and rows of beehives dotting the property. Elsa greeted him on the front porch, her arms crossed over a plain flannel shirt. Her jeans were faded, and her boots were caked in mud, but her posture exuded quiet strength. "Benjamin Carter, I presume?" she said, her voice calm but tinged with skepticism. Benjamin forced a smile, trying to hide his discomfort. "Yeah, that's me," he muttered, dropping his suitcase. "I didn't ask for this," Elsa said bluntly, her hazel eyes steady. "But if we're stuck in this situation, you'll need to pull your weight." Benjamin raised an eyebrow, his pride prickling. "I don't even know the first thing about farming, let alone bees." "Then you'd better start learning," Elsa replied sharply, turning back toward the house. As Benjamin followed her inside, it hit him. He didn't belong here. And yet, there was no escape. Not yet. The first morning on the farm came far too early for Benjamin. He was jolted awake by the shrill crowing of a rooster, a sound he was convinced was designed to torment him. He rolled over in the small, creaky bed, groaning as sunlight poured through the thin curtains. "Get up!" Elsa's voice rang out from the hallway, brisk and unforgiving. "We've got work to do." Dragging himself out of bed, Benjamin threw on the only clothes he had brought, a pair of jeans and a button-up shirt that looked painfully out of place in this environment. When he stepped outside, Elsa was already busy near the beehives, her sleeves rolled up as she worked with practiced ease. "Grab the smoker," she instructed without looking up, pointing toward a metal device on the table. Benjamin stared at the contraption, clueless. "The what?" Elsa sighed, walking over to demonstrate. "It calms the bees. You'll need it before opening a hive. Unless, of course, you want to get stung." It didn't take long for Benjamin to realize that farm work was nothing like the gym sessions he used to boast about in the city. Cleaning out hives, extracting honey, and maintaining the beekeeping equipment was messy, exhausting, and relentless. By midday, his shirt was drenched in sweat, and his arms were covered in faint red welts from minor bee stings. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath as he hauled a bucket of honeycomb into the barn. Elsa appeared behind him, her expression unreadable. "This is just a normal day," she said plainly. "You're not going to survive here if you keep whining." Benjamin bristled but said nothing. He hated how out of place he felt, how every task reminded him that he didn't belong. And yet, as the days dragged on, he began to notice things. the rhythmic hum of the bees, the earthy scent of the fields, the way Elsa moved with calm determination. It all began to chip away at his resentment. But the work was grueling. Every muscle in his body ached at the end of the day. Blisters formed on his hands, and his patience wore thin. Still, there was something oddly grounding about the routine, something that kept him coming back. "Not bad," Elsa said one evening, glancing at a freshly cleaned hive. It was the closest thing to a compliment she had offered him. For Benjamin, it wasn't much, but it was a start. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of farm life began to settle into Benjamin's bones. The early mornings that once felt torturous were now met with quiet determination. He still ached at the end of each day, his hands rougher and his once pristine clothes perpetually stained. But something about the simplicity of the routine felt grounding, even satisfying. It was during one of these quiet mornings that Benjamin first noticed her, not just as Elsa, the woman who had barked orders at him since he arrived, but as someone with a quiet strength and grace that he couldn't ignore. In that moment, he felt something shift, an unfamiliar warmth he hadn't experienced before. She was working by the beehives, her movements fluid and deliberate. The morning light caught strands of her hair that had slipped loose from her ponytail, framing her face in a way Benjamin hadn't noticed before. There was a calmness to her that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the farm. She seemed to belong here, in this world of buzzing bees and open fields, in a way Benjamin never had anywhere else. As she wiped her brow and glanced up, their eyes met briefly. She gave a small, fleeting smile, a rare softness breaking through her usual stoicism, and then returned to her work. For reasons he couldn't explain, Benjamin found himself smiling too. Later that day, as they worked side by side repairing a section of fence, Benjamin found himself asking questions, not about the farm or the bees, but about her. "How did you get into beekeeping?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Elsa paused, her hands tightening the wire as she spoke. "My dad started it. He believed in taking care of the land, keeping it alive for the next generation. When he passed, I couldn't let it go. This farm, it's all I have left of him." Her voice was steady, but Benjamin caught the flicker of emotion beneath it. He wanted to say something comforting, but words failed him. Instead, he simply nodded, his respect for her deepening. As the days turned into evenings, Benjamin began to look forward to their quiet moments together. Whether it was sharing a meal on the porch or working in companionable silence, he felt a connection forming, something unspoken but undeniable. One night, as they watched the sun set over the fields, Benjamin finally broke the silence. "You're amazing, you know that?" he said softly. Elsa glanced at him, her eyes searching his face. "You're not too bad yourself, city boy." For the first time since arriving on the farm, Benjamin realized he wasn't just adapting to the work or the routine. He was starting to care, and it scared him, but it also felt more real than anything he'd known before. The storm came without warning. The morning had been gray and overcast, but by midday the wind picked up, whipping through the fields with a ferocity that Benjamin had never experienced. "Get the hives covered!" Elsa's voice cut through the roar of the wind as she sprinted toward the beekeeping area. "If the rain soaks them, we could lose the colonies." Benjamin followed her, his feet slipping in the mud as rain began to pour. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and the distant rumble of thunder. Elsa was already working to cover the hives with tarps, her movements quick and efficient despite the worsening weather. "Here," she shouted, tossing him a rope. "Secure that side before the wind tears it off." Benjamin grabbed the rope, his hands trembling as he fought against the howling wind. The tarp flapped wildly, threatening to break free, but he held on, tying it down with a determination he didn't know he had. The storm intensified, sending sheets of rain cascading over them. Once the hives were secure, Elsa motioned toward the barn. "We need to check on the animals." By the time they reached the barn, the animals were restless, their nervous movements a clear sign they sensed the storm's fury. Together, Benjamin and Elsa worked to calm them, securing the barn doors against the pounding wind and checking that everything inside was stable. As they finished, Benjamin leaned against the barn wall, rainwater dripping from his hair and clothes. His chest heaved as he caught his breath. "Is it always like this?" he asked, half joking. Elsa gave a small nod, her face streaked with rain and mud. "It's not glamorous, but it's real. You either adapt or you fail." For the first time, Benjamin saw something in her eyes, a fire, a resilience he couldn't help but admire. She wasn't just strong, she was relentless. They stood there for a moment, the storm raging outside but a quiet understanding forming between them. In that chaos, Benjamin realized this wasn't just about survival. It was about trust, about building something together that neither could have done alone. "Let's get inside," Elsa said, her voice softer now, almost gentle. "We've done all we can." Back in the farmhouse, Benjamin sat by the fire, the warmth slowly thawing his chilled body. Elsa handed him a cup of tea, her expression unreadable but not unfriendly. "Thanks," he muttered, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Elsa gave a faint smile. "You didn't do too bad out there, city boy." For the first time since his arrival, Benjamin felt like he might actually belong, even if just a little. That night, the storm's aftermath lingered in Benjamin's mind. As he stared at the fire crackling in the hearth, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of accomplishment. But the calm didn't last. The next morning, William arrived, bringing with him a truth that threatened to undo everything Benjamin had begun to build. Benjamin was in the barn, stacking bales of hay, when he saw a sleek black car pull up to the farmhouse. It stood out against the rustic surroundings like a sore thumb, its polished surface glinting in the sun. Benjamin's chest tightened as he recognized the man stepping out. William Carter. Elsa emerged from the house, wiping her hands on a rag, her expression cautious but composed. Benjamin joined her on the porch just as William approached. "Benjamin," William said curtly, his gaze sweeping over his son's sunburnt face and calloused hands. "I didn't expect you to look so integrated." "What are you doing here, Dad?" Benjamin asked, his tone wary. William's smile was cold, calculated. "I came to see how my little experiment was going, but I also thought it was time you knew the full story." Benjamin's stomach sank. He glanced at Elsa, who suddenly looked tense. "What are you talking about?" William crossed his arms, his gaze flicking to Elsa. "This arrangement wasn't entirely my idea. Elsa came to me first. She proposed the marriage. The farm was failing, and she needed the money to keep it running." The words hit Benjamin like a punch to the gut. He turned to Elsa, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Is that true?" Elsa's face paled, but she didn't look away. "Yes," she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "I went to your father because I had no other choice. I tried everything, loans, selling what I could, but nothing worked. The farm is more than land to me, Benjamin. It's my family's legacy. I couldn't bear to lose it. I didn't expect him to involve you like this." Benjamin felt a wave of anger and betrayal rise in his chest. "So, this was all just a deal? A way to save the farm?" Elsa stepped closer, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "It started that way, yes, but it wasn't about using you, Benjamin. I didn't know how else to keep this place alive. It's my home. It's all I have." William's smug expression only fueled Benjamin's frustration. "See," William said, his tone sharp and cutting, "this wasn't about romance or destiny. It was a business deal, plain and simple. Survival for her and a lesson for you." "You should have told me," Benjamin said, his voice shaking with hurt. "All this time I thought my father was pulling the strings, but it was you too. Do you know how much that hurts?" "I know," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "But I was afraid you'd leave and everything would fall apart." The weight of her words and the truth behind them settled over Benjamin. He looked at his father, whose cold indifference was a stark contrast to Elsa's vulnerability. "This isn't your victory, Dad," Benjamin said firmly. "You manipulated both of us, but you underestimated something." William raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" Benjamin's gaze softened as it shifted back to Elsa. "I'm not leaving." That evening, The farmhouse was quieter than usual. Benjamin sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone in front of him. His father's words echoed in his mind, a relentless reminder of the life he could return to, a life of wealth, power, and status. All he had to do was leave the farm and Elsa behind. The thought made his chest tighten. Elsa walked into the kitchen, her expression guarded. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "What are you going to do?" Benjamin looked up at her, the weight of the decision visible in his eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "This is everything I thought I wanted. A way out. A chance to go back to my old life." Elsa crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "Then take it," she said, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." Benjamin shook his head, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "That's just it. I don't know if I want it anymore. Everything in New York, all of it, it doesn't feel the same now. Not after this place. Not after you." Elsa blinked, caught off guard by his honesty. She opened her mouth to speak but closed it again, unsure of what to say. Benjamin stood, running a hand through his hair. "I came here thinking this was a punishment, a way for my father to control me, but now, I don't know. Maybe this place isn't just about survival. Maybe it's about finding something real." He stepped closer to Elsa, his voice softening. "You've shown me that, Elsa. This farm, the work, it's all real. It's messy and hard and nothing like the life I knew, but it's meaningful. And I don't want to lose that." Elsa looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "So, what are you saying?" Benjamin took a deep breath, his voice steady and resolute. "I'm saying I'm staying, not because I have to, but because I choose to. I don't want to go back to New York, and I don't want to leave you, Elsa. You mean more to me than all of that combined." For a moment, Elsa didn't move. Then, a small, tentative smile broke across her face. "You're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Benjamin replied. As the tension between them eased, Benjamin felt a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. The farm wasn't just a place anymore. It was home. The days that followed felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted. Benjamin and Elsa worked side by side, tending to the farm with a sense of shared purpose. There was still the occasional challenge, a broken fence, a stubborn hive. But something had shifted. They weren't just surviving, they were building. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting the fields in hues of gold and orange, Benjamin and Elsa sat together on the porch. The air was warm, filled with the gentle hum of bees returning to their hives for the night. Benjamin leaned back against the railing, watching Elsa as she gazed out over the land. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "this is more than I ever thought I'd have. More than I ever thought I'd want." Elsa turned to him, her lips curving into a rare, genuine smile. "Me too," she admitted softly. They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that spoke of understanding and peace. The farm, once a symbol of obligation and hardship, had become a place of growth, connection, and hope. Benjamin reached for Elsa's hand, their fingers intertwining. "We've got a lot of work ahead," he said with a hint of a smile. Elsa nodded, squeezing his hand lightly. "Good thing we make a decent team." As the stars began to dot the night sky, Benjamin felt a sense of contentment he'd never known. He wasn't chasing wealth or status anymore. What he had now, a partner, a purpose, and a home, was far more valuable. Together, they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. As the stars lit up the vast country sky above them, Benjamin knew with an unshakable certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Thank you for listening to Benjamin and Elsa's journey, a story of unexpected challenges, personal growth, and finding purpose in the unlikeliest of places. Now it's your turn. What part of their story resonated with you the most? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between comfort and what truly matters? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections in the comments below, and let's inspire each other with our own journeys.